So firstly, thank you so much, Karthik, for coming today and for volunteering your time and for answering questions. So can you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
As Toy mentioned, my name is Karthik, and I guess I'm here today to sort of give an insight and lend a perspective of what a student feels like going through the entire selective schools process. So right from preparing for the exam, sitting it, and hopefully eventually attending a selective school. I attended Suzanne Corey from 2015 and graduated last year, which feels like quite a while ago now. But it was definitely very fun, rewarding, and pretty unforgettable, like 4 years of not only education, but just period of my life in general. And it's something that I hope all your kids get to experience for themselves as well. Right now I'm at Melbourne University doing commerce, which is going quite well. And I also tutor at Spectrum at Hoppers Crossing branch, as Toy mentioned. And that's also been like a really great learning experience for me as well. And one that I'm grateful and I'm glad to have been able to undertake. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So Karthik, can you remember back to the day of the exam and describe what that process was like?
Yeah, I took the exam in 2014, so quite a few years ago now. But I do remember like the morning, I walked into like the exhibition grounds. I just was shocked by the amount of people that were there. I think Toy mentioned that there's over like 3,000 kids that sit the exam, which is just a crazy amount. So that's probably the thing that stood out the most that morning. I think I wasn't as nervous as I thought I would be, mostly because I didn't really fully understand like what was like waiting for me, like if I got into the school. Now, looking back, if I'd known, I'd probably be a lot more nervous. It's probably a good thing that I wasn't. But yeah, I mostly just remember seeing a bunch of people and trying to keep calm as I walked in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how did you prepare for the exam?
So I went to a different tutoring company for about a year prior to the exam. And that was really similar to the things Toy talked about, like I did tests and I went through knowledge and things like that. And I think the biggest aspect of the preparation that helped me was just doing those tests over and over again and going through that process. Not so much the content, obviously that's important to be able to like answer questions and write essays, but just I think it gave me the confidence to go into the test and not be overwhelmed. Like it was just like, it gave me the reassurance that I'm capable of doing this, like this is not beyond me. And I think that's the most important thing of the preparation process, just to be reassured and have that confidence going in.
So how did your parents support you throughout that process?
My mum was really great. So she's the one that did all the research and stuff to kind of put forward that I should do this whole process. I fully really didn't understand what the whole thing was. She just said that it's a selective school, I think it'd be really good for you. And she was supportive in that she always like talked to me and explained why she was kind of encouraging me or pushing me to do it. And I think that was important because I didn't feel forced or anything like that, but it was good that she was able to talk to me and explain why this would be best for me. And I'm looking back now, I'm glad that she did. Yeah.
Great. Did anything surprise you about the preparation process and the exam itself?
The exam itself, I did expect it to be hard, and it was quite hard. I just think the process, just the length of the process. So prior to Suzanne Corey, I did tutoring to get into like the Where Have You Self program, but that was only for like half a year. So going to the selective schools preparation, which is for a full year, was definitely something I didn't anticipate, like it being that long. And again, just like the sheer number of students that try out for these schools is definitely sort of shocking, and I didn't anticipate that at first as well.
What do you wish you knew before sitting the exam to help you prepare a little bit more?
I don't know. I don't think there is anything. I think the less I knew was probably the better. Not in terms of content, but just in terms of like, what, all the benefits and stuff. Looking back now that I know that I came from that school, if I'd known, I would have felt a whole lot more pressure. So I think sort of the less you know and you just focus on trying your best, giving it your best shot, regardless of whether you get in or not, it sounds cliche, but as Toy mentioned, regardless of whether you get in or not, the skills that you develop going in through that whole process are really is the benefit in the end, and getting in or not is sort of just a bonus. Yeah.
Yeah. So you attended the Werribee SELP program, is that where you were?
Yeah, for year 7 and 8, I was in Werribee Secondary in the SELP program. Yeah.
Okay. How does the experience there compare to the experience that you got at Susan Corey?
Yeah, so they're similar in that they're both accelerator programs. So you're going to be doing work and learning at a level that's quite advanced to what similar students would do at other schools. But I think the biggest difference, or the most striking aspect of these schools, and my experiences in Corey, is just the sense of community, and I think like culture at the schools. And what I mean by that is you'll often hear the term like a community for like-minded students used to describe selective schools, and that doesn't just mean that everyone that goes there wants to do well. That's part of it, but it's more than that. There is this aspect of competition, but if you stroll through the study centre during the day, you'll find groups of students working on problems together, or students helping other students through explaining difficult concepts and things like that. And even teachers will be giving up their spare time outside of class to do all they can to help. And I think there's this genuine value given to not only achieving your own goals, but helping others to do the same. And I think that's where the like-minded aspect really shines through for me. Being able to, being surrounded by people who value the same things you do, that set their sights high, it sort of just rubs off on you, and it pushes you further than what just a high-quality curriculum alone will do. And that applies to not just academic achievements, but in all the passions and fields that you kids are interested in. There's always sporting competitions, or house chorals, or even things like lunchtime stuff like open mics, or student band performances that are always happening. And I think those are things that really reinforce that aspect of community and culture of the school, and ultimately what kids that go there will remember after 4 years. So yeah.
Great. So what was your attitude towards schooling like before you sat the selective schools exam? Have you always been?
Yeah, I'd say I always liked learning, or always keen to learn. Like I said, because I went to the Werribee SELP thing, all I've ever known is sort of this accelerated learning environment. So apart from primary school, but from high school, that's all I've ever known. So I would say, yeah, that I always had kind of a value of learning and stuff, and I'm sure that's sort of instilled by my parents as well. But I think, I always had that drive to want to do well in school and to learn, and all that.
Great. How do you think you would have performed without preparation?
In short, not as well, obviously. Probably not as well. But yeah, I touched on it before, the preparation, knowing the content, learning how to do problems, write essays is all well and good, and that's definitely important. But I think without the preparation, I wouldn't have had that confidence and that reassurance going in that I can do this. This is not something I haven't seen before. This is not really beyond me. It's something that is achievable, and that I can do it. And without that preparation, I don't think I would have been able to have that confidence.
Yeah. So what advice would you give parents who are looking to help their kids prepare for these types of competitive exams?
For parents, I would say always communicate with your children. And really, try and make them understand, or talk to them as to why you're keen for them to go through this process, and push them along. When you're dealing with 13 and 14-year-olds, and I have a brother who's in year 7, so he's just about to go through this as well, it can be quite hard to get them motivated to study, or to really give it their best shot at this exam, because we might all know what the benefits of going to these schools is, but at that age it can be really hard for them to grasp exactly why, and especially if they don't have any explanation or guidance from you guys. And I think it's important here to understand their perspective, because you're asking them to give up their Saturdays and go to tutoring to do extra work during the week that when they look around at school, their other classmates likely aren't doing. And, you know, there's times when they're probably just sitting there thinking, you know, what for? You know, why am I doing this? You know, when you don't know exactly what you're working toward, or, you know, you feel forced into something, you're just not going to do you're not going to do the best you can, and it's definitely like a demotivating factor. So I'd say, you know, really sit down and take out the time to discuss with your children, you know, why this is the best course of action, or why, you know, you feel like they would benefit from going to these schools. And like I said, when you're dealing with kids that age, it can be a tall task, like a tall order, but if you can do that, and if you can get them to understand and want to study for their own benefit, not because they feel like they're being forced or made to do something, they're going to perform the best they can, and they're going to be better for it.
Great. And so what advice would you give students who are looking to prepare for these types of exams?
For students, I'd say, you know, do the consistent work, and obviously that if you go into tutoring, that the tutor places give you, but I would say always just keep a good attitude. Like, don't get too stressed and too worked up about it. Just understand that, you know, like Tutor mentioned before, all learning is not wasted. Like, learning is not wasted. So going through this process, yes, you have that goal, that end goal of wanting to get into the school, but I would focus on the process of getting there and doing the consistent work and effort that goes into it. And, you know, if you get in at the end, it's just a bonus. But if you don't, you can fall back on all those skills and those habits that you've learned that will hold you in good stead for the rest of your schooling, which is, you know, more important than just going to one particular school. Yeah.
Great. That's all I have. They're all the questions I have. Does anybody have any questions for Karthik at this stage? Yeah. I might just... oh, you've got a question.
Hey Karthik, just a quick one. I've got a couple of friends and their kids got into Melbourne High, and basically those kids were above average, flourishing at the current schools, but as soon as they got into Melbourne High, they just lost it, because they found kids from kids whose standards were quite above their standard, and they just collapsed. And even now they are in the uni and they're still struggling, literally struggling from just by virtue of going to Melbourne High, they are struggling. Otherwise they were doing fine. So do you have an opinion or a comment on this?
Yeah, that's a common thing. You know, a lot of students, I'd say I was an exception because I was in an accelerated learning program before CJ Corey, but, you know, a lot of my friends at school just weren't. And it can be a hard transition because you go from being, you know, like the top A+ student, often without as much effort as you would put in those schools at your previous school, to being surrounded by all the people that get A+ at their schools, you know, and it can be hard to try and find your place, and you can feel overwhelmed and feel like you don't belong. But I think, I didn't go to Melbourne High, I'm not sure, but I would say that community aspect that I was talking about before, and that willingness and ability to like help others is something that definitely that helps in that transition. But just like any other high school, like high school's hard, like just like any other high school, it can be hard to transition. I guess, you know, the best you can do is try and lean on your friends and you know, go seek out the teachers and resources that's available at the school. And the teachers are great. So like my teachers at the school, like I could go to them after school, you know, hand them countless essays and all that, and they would happily mark them and give me feedback. But yeah, I understand how it can be a rough transition, but I would say make sure you're aware of all the resources and facilities and stuff that's in place to help you, because the schools know that as well. Like the schools understand where all the students are coming from and how it can be a different environment. So I would definitely say make sure you're aware of all the resources that are available at schools and go out and seek them out if you need that help.
Any other questions? No. All right, we'll go back to these questions. Does the question or exam format of the selective tests evolve along the years, or do they remain the same? If it's evolved, how do you adjust your practice questions at Spectrum? So what we do is we call up students at the end of after the selective schools test, or we send out a survey, and students will give us feedback, and then we then make those adjustments in our courses accordingly. So that's how we know that it's at a Year 10 standard, because you wouldn't think that a test for Year 8s would be at such a high level, but when students describe what they've seen, we can then make those adjustments to our courses. I might direct this one to you, Karthik. What advantage or benefit for a student that has graduated from a selective school?
I would say just being in the environment of a selective school where you are surrounded by, like I mentioned before, those people that have like the similar goals to you, that set their standards high. It just sort of rubs off on you, and in that process you develop the habits that are necessary to excel later in life. Things like time management, or the intangible skills like time management, being organised and all that stuff that you always hear about. It does develop those things going to a selective school, and once you come out of it, that's when I think it sort of benefits the most, because that's when you're applying those skills you've learned in uni, or in an environment that's a lot more independent than school.
Yeah, great. So you've mentioned that it's a 40-week course starting in term 3 for Spectrum Selective School, and we cover from content from Year 7 to Year 10 in 1 year. So when I sign up my son for this program, since he's already 1 grade above his current year, does it mean that we can enrol this program in Year 6? Well, firstly, we do an assessment anyway for all of our students, and then we'll then place them into classes accordingly. So if he's not quite in Year 7 yet, then we suggest that you book in a free assessment. We'll place them wherever, and then when the students do get to the middle of Year 7, then they can transition into the selective schools course, because it is a very, very intense course that we have. So the earlier you develop the habits of doing homework, preparing for a quiz every single week, being in that environment where you're doing a little bit of extra work, it will really help them transition into that selective course as well. So when we're introducing new concepts, then because they've already covered it a little bit in previous years, they'll be able to pick it up and grasp it a lot earlier, a lot easier. So in the program, will all kids be in the same grade? How does it work? Are you mixing the kids between 7 to 10? No, it's not about the kids. The course itself will cover content from Year 7 to Year 10, just in the way that we structure the courses, structure the material. All the students will be in the middle of Year 7. Like, we don't take any students before that. There might be students who might be preparing for the Year 9 exam to enter in Year 10. And from what I hear from students who have sat that exam in Year 9 to get into Year 10, the content is very, very similar to the content in Year 8. Okay, so, but we don't take any students earlier than Year 7. For the program, can students join in the middle of the week? So join week 10 out of 40 weeks. Well, the sooner you start, the earlier you will benefit from the course, because it is a full year course. So the earlier you start, the earlier you'll start to achieve to learn those benefits. How do you maintain interest and enthusiasm throughout the studying for students? So Amy's asked that question. By doing that weekly quiz, and by making sure that the students are actually learning content every single week. It's not just doing a practice exam. Students are actually learning, and they're quite enthusiastic about learning the new content, and they find that they're a lot more capable than what they think that they are. For somebody like Callie, for her to go from someone who was really struggling with her times tables to be able to do Year 10 maths, like, can you imagine what she might have been feeling towards the end? Like, I can actually do this. I can solve these questions really, really quickly, So I firmly believe that all students actually do enjoy learning, and it's just about making sure that you're teaching them at the level that they are able to engage with, that will determine whether they maintain interest. So if the content is too hard, they lose interest. If the content is too easy, they lose interest. So it needs to be at that sweet spot, which we will determine during our assessment phase. Student to teacher ratio, we've got a maximum of 15 students in each class. Any other questions? All right, I want you to, if you can help me thank Karthik for spending the time today.